This is directly from the film. So
That,
I'm not making this up.
you are absolutely making this up.
Welcome to the Flick Lab. I'm Karri Ojala. My co-host is still the legendary Henrik Telkki.
Legendary in extreme quotation marks.
Legendary in Finnish terms.
Legendary in all the wrong ways.
Man of the legend. This is a film podcast, if you didn't know. In this we will look at international cinema. And we will go to the US market every now and then. This is a bi-weekly product currently. And we try to look at films in larger overall themes. Like now we're looking at the one director's entire filmography. Mind you, it's not going to be very large this time, but nevertheless. How is my co-host?
Extremely busy. Once again, on a scale from 1 to 10 when it comes to being busy, I'm once again on that please shoot me now point.
So typical Finnish way.
Yeah, I have to do like 3 sculptures for the local design week, plus the goddamn snow sculptures for the main stage, and I have a small academic paper to write. So no stress at all.
Well, at least it's not sculptures or lobotomy.
I could use one about this point.
Well, we have one person just to do that job in one of these films. Yeah, so we are both from Finland, so I believe you will be in agony of the Finnish rally accent for the next couple of hours. Hope you can comprehend our mumbling.
Well, but, not knowing some of the listener feedback we have been getting in the past, perhaps it's better if you don't actually make any sense of the mumbling.
But at least there is a sense to the mumbling, in a way that Henrik is going to be Master of Arts, now studying in the University of Lapland, while I'm here in the southern area of Finland, in the capital Helsinki, and studied media for a couple of years.
Helsinki also known as the Corona hot zone, the dead zone, the no-go zone.
Yeah, well, and you are in the middle of the woods, there to be captured by somebody like from The Chaser, the film that we're going to discuss soon.
Well, seeing how I'm a university student in Finland, prostitution is pretty likable future venue for me when once again the financial troubles hit.
Is this suggesting that there's a lot of prostitution at your university?
Well, it's kind of suggesting that every student in Finland is so rat-ass poor that prostitution is pretty much kind of you take it road for Finnish students.
Oh yeah, but I wasn't talking about you. We already know about you. Okay. So The Chaser and The Yellow Sea and The Wailing are the 3 main targets that we're going to discuss tonight. But also 2 of his short films that we might discuss first, because they are first on the menu if we go chronologically year-wise. Na Hong-jin was actually considered a director who may have been the most discussion-evoking director before Bong Joon-ho, who has directed, for example, the Parasite film. So a lot of societal discussion that he started with, at least his first film, and definitely very thought-evoking films in general, especially if we look at the direction of The Wailing. His stories seem to be a little bit scattered in the narrative ways. There's a lot of points of interest. You think you're following a certain plotline until you're given like a certain other plotline that seems to take hold of the story as we go on, and then it's kind of a multi-layered, multi-stacked. It's not your like consumer piecemeal that you go to watch in the cinema. Kind of time and time again we find something kind of different and exciting from the direction of South Korea. For example, you just need to look at the running time of The Wailing, this 2016 horror film from him, which is 2.5 hours. It's not very common running time for a horror film. One could of course argue if that length was justified. But moving on. In 2003, he directed, wrote, and produced the 2003 film 5 Minutes, short film which we were unable to find, or were you able to find it?
No, unfortunately, nope.
And this was followed by a 2005 short, A Perfect Red Snapper Dish, which he directed and wrote. Also did something to the sound. Well, here we already see kind of his kind of a way of telling very violent stories, but not only violent, there is also kind of the humor or sick humor aspect in it, as we can see.
Yeah, the red snapper dish, the perfect fish plate, which I guess is another English title for the short. Outside of the Yellow Sea, this perhaps might be one of the more violent films from his filmography. It's not in the sense that the act would be like super lot of violence, not so that there would be super lot of necessarily gore, especially in detailed gore, but when you kind of take it and put it side by side with the running time, you actually get pretty much different types of violence, different also some body horror in the perfect fish plate.
Yeah, and for people who haven't seen the film and who have no intention of watching the film, it's about a cook who gets a work order to do the perfect red snapper dish. But of course something goes wrong and he has to do the dish over and over and over again, and things get a little psychotic in the kitchen. And body parts start dropping off. So body horror, as you said. Then at the end, well, there is the customer who has died. One could only wonder what happened there. Was it like he was cooking it for several hundreds of years and spent years of cooking, and then we have the nice two-shot to end all that in the restaurant.
From his body of work, the Red Snapper Dish also is the most clearly it's the most hilarious, like most comedic movie. It's as a 9-minute short film, it is a comedy movie, like first and foremost. There are comedic elements in his other films as well, perhaps most in The Wailing and the least in The Yellow Sea. But the Red Snapper Dish is it is the only direct comedy that he has done.
Could be. That being said, the biggest laughs that I have is during The Chaser. Say of that what you want, but I think there's a lot of comedic value here. And somehow seeing the kind of the play between the main characters in that film is great fun to watch. It's something about just the kind of the characters of the actors perhaps themselves that I think it's a great match. Great performances too in both of these movies, The Yellow Sea and The Chaser, from these same actors. And A Perfect Red Snapper Dish also ends in a kind of a downer ending. This is a recurring theme in his films. Then in 2007, he did the short film Sweat. And as by the title suggests, it's about sweat dropping as droplets into several surfaces. I kind of enjoyed that. This is kind of seamlessly cutting from scene to scene. We have a person who is sweating, and then the droplet drops somewhere, and then you kind of seamlessly got to the next scene where somebody is sweating. It's kind of a continuous story in a way. Although there is not really story per se, it's just sequences of sweat. Very artistic film.
Yeah, perhaps the most surreal movie from the filmography.
Yeah, I particularly enjoyed perhaps the most seamless transition from what was sex and then suddenly giving birth, actually giving kind of the creepy vibes there. And perhaps that came out of nowhere. You didn't expect that when we have the sweat scene of the boxing. There is blood and there's sweat, and then we see a guy who is drinking, and then we realize that the boxing is actually coming from the TV. There is a massage, there's a car scene, ironing, cooking, eating, boxing, drinking, sex, giving birth, all coming together, believe it or not. I guess that's everything we have to offer to our listeners regarding the short films.
I would say too, like I have to confess, I don't think there's too much to dissect from the short films themselves. There is the comedy of the red snapper dish, and then there is the more kind of experimental, more artistic touches of the sweat. You can kind of see his short films as kind of building blocks for artistic decisions that he later uses in his features. Or to put it in other words, you can see them as him trying different type of styles and different type of cinematic storytelling devices that later on come to play in the feature films. Like in Red Snapper Dish, you can see the trying and at the attempts at comedy. And later on in his films, even though the features are more serious in the tone, you can kind of see it carrying out. First, I do this comedic short film, then I do serious features that still have the comedic element. And with the sweat, you can kind of see him trying extreme close-ups and also trying different types of cinematic transitionings that later on you can occasionally see in his features, especially kind of the usage of close-ups.
Yeah, there are some parallels, some connecting parts in all of the films. In part, probably because the scriptwriter, the director himself, has been dabbling there quite a lot. Sometimes these occur in surprising ways, sometimes they are less obvious.
Of course, that being said, it's kind of taking a notice that a director uses close-ups in his films. It's not really any kind of a deeply insightful film criticism at all. Like, no shit, Asian films have close-ups.
But some quite artistic close-ups. Henrik, quote, "Women shouldn't be sluts, and the rich should know what they've done," end quote.
I take no sides on that argument.
This is from the serial killer Chul, for which the first film that we're probably going to discuss tonight is based on, The Chaser. But Henrik, god damn it, this director is quite a capable guy. But so, The Chaser from 2008. Well, what's your experience with Chaser, Henrik?
To me, Chaser was an unknown little film from an, at the time, unknown director. I found the DVD. It was circulating in Finland. Was it Asian? No, it wasn't. I don't know what was I don't remember what was the Finnish DVD release lineup in which Chaser ended up being.
PirateBay.org?
No. This is an honest film podcast, you goddamn pirate.
Yeah, just kidding.
But it was circulating in Finland to this date. As far as I know, The Chaser is the only film from Hwanghae who has gotten a DVD release in Finland, and even that one was pretty limited. But that essentially, like buying an obscure Korean thriller film from an obscure Korean director, that's kind of is my past experience with The Chaser.
My experiences with The Chaser, I saw it for the first time when I was doing my Kauhae, once again the horror movie festival. Well, the Chaser, I guess it can be discussed if it's really horror, but that's also one of the genre tags that was given to the film, so I took my chances and went with it without seeing it. This is Na Hong-jin's first feature film. He gets to showcase how he kind of equates crooked cops to chasers. It's quite poetic, Henrik. What do you think? I think the director is a bit too passionate about his alcohol consumption. look up for the sequel called Switchel, referring to the drink that you take following a vodka, the chaser. About the actors a bit. Henrik, Korean cinema, your favorite topic, so...
On my part, extremely unknown actors.
So we have Kim Yeon-sok made his acting debut in 1988 with A Streetcar Named Desire. Actually, it's a theater play. But breakthrough in movies came with Choi Dong-hoon's Daza the High Rollers, where the audiences praised his performance as a gambler. Kim once again came to the attention of the film fanatics in the heist movie The Thieves, which I unfortunately haven't seen, but who cares. It became the second best-selling Korean film of all time. And then he went on to do Hwanghae, A Monster Boy, which I can recommend to our listeners, by Chang Jung-hwan. And then we have our antagonist for this film, Ha Jung-woo. Born in 1978, in 2005 he adopted the stage name Ha Jung-woo, and he was born Kim Sung-hoon. And his whole family, at least the father and brother, they are also actors. And he always dreamed of following on that line. He appeared in his first starring role in The Unforgiven indie film about the physical and psychological violence in the military ranks. And just like the protagonist actor Kim Yeon-sok in this film, his breakout was The Chaser. Even Martin Scorsese has come forward and praising the actor for Departed. The Chaser, it's kind of a hopeless film, and you could say that all of his feature films end up with a downer note, as stated. In the case of The Wailing, perhaps you can make some alternative readings, but it seems that all of his films seem to end on a downer note. This film feels quite hopeless, and it's not exactly doing what you may first think that it is doing, as it's actually concentrating on the kind of the relationship of these two characters, antagonist, protagonist, and whatever happens around them is kind of a secondary, hence, for example, the shock killing of the woman in the end. And it's also making societal statements. It seems that all of the films, actually all of these three films, are very critical of the police force. And that's also what he wanted to convey, and via that to also hopefully evoke some change.
Yeah, criticizing the police force, also kind of taking a look at the smaller institutions is kind of the running theme, I would say, in his three feature films. You get these smaller, more singular environments or institutions in his films, like in The Chaser. A lot of the weight or the emotional impact, it revolves around a small secular group that is the pimp, the serial killer, and the prostitutes. So you have a pimp customer and prostitutions, which kind of form the environment around which Chaser's story happens. In the Yellow Sea, that's heavily relies on immigration, and then in the Wailing you have the small kind of a cut off town, not even a city, but a town, and the local township police force that they have.
And I would say that in many ways this is even the best written film from him. You could also praise the unconventional way in which the Wailing is structured, but what I mean in the case of The Chaser is that there is a actual proper arc for our main protagonist, where he first is this kind of a ruthless pimp ex-police, having this very shady ways of operating and running everything, and just at first it's about getting his business going and getting money and paying his debts, by finding this prostitute, and maybe it's also more of a kind of a personal thing that what the hell is happening to all of my prostitutes, and I need to get these people back and get this whoever it might be selling my ladies to elsewhere back in order. But then somewhere around perhaps the mark when he gets involved with the little girl of this prostitute, it starts to shift. Actually, it's a little bit before that when it becomes kind of his passion project. He has an emotional attachment to finding this lady in good health.
Yeah, character development wise, Chaser might be the kind of the strongest. The Yellow Sea and the Wailing, even though they both films also have a prominent central character, they more revolve around kind of the plot structure or the happenings surrounding that character, and the changes in those stories, they more happened more in the name of the situation surrounding our character changes in somehow, and there's a kind of a plot related twists, whereas in the Chaser, the main changes, the main twists happen in the way how you see the main character and how the main character kind of emotionally wise changes in course of the film.
Yeah, even though The Chaser is also easier to read, it's clearly the easiest film to digest. Well, apart from maybe the violence, but I mean, it's very easy to understand what is going on throughout the film. That is clear. But what I'm saying, yeah, like you said, character development might be the best here, and I think it might be the best overall result as a movie. That the Yellow Sea has its own problems that we can dig a bit deeper later, but. And then the Wailing, well, it has sometimes kind of split the general audience, but I see that the critics seem to pretty much 100% agree that this is a fantastic product.
I don't know. I kind of am extremely mixed when it comes to the Chaser. Whereas the film does have the most kind of a character related arc, I felt that the actual narrative arc in the Chaser is perhaps the most it obviously it wants to be on a left field, but at the same time I kind of had a problem connecting with the narrative core of the plot structure within the Chaser. Like in its core, the Chaser it's a police procedural where it very much works in the same way as your typical cop movies. You have a criminal, you have the inciting incident, the crime, and then you have the investigation. Except unlike in your typical cop movie, police procedural, your investigator movie, in the Chaser, you are following a protagonist who really isn't really trying to solve the case that the film presents to you. You are following an investigator who is doing an investigation, but that investigation is completely wrong one. The main character in the Chaser is looking for a missing prostitute. Coming from the perspective that prostitute has fallen into human trafficking. Like the main assumption of our main hero in the Chaser is that the prostitute he's looking for has been abducted or kidnapped and then sold further. And this is the investigation you are following throughout the film, while at the very beginning of the movie it's made extremely clear to you that what we are following is a serial killer movie, and there is an attempted murder which then turns into a near death and, well, in the final moments to an actually successed murder. But that's kind of a like there's a disconnect between what our main character is investigating and what is the actual case of the film. And to some people that may work, extremely well. Some way even see that as taking a renegade spin on the whole police procedural film type. But at the same time, to me, me personally, it led kind of a bit disjointed from the narrative proceedings in the film. Essentially, we are looking at a police or detective character to whom the main plot twist at the end of the film is that the serial killer of the movie is actually, killing people. It's kind of like Silence with the Lambs, if you would follow Clarice turning throughout the film. And then on the final minutes, Clarice would realize that, oh my god, yeah, Buffalo Bill, he has been killing these women.
Well, I'm not sure where you're going with this, like saying that you can't combine a plotline where we have a police investigation and kind of a pimp character who is kind of doing their job for them, where the pimp is kind of the audience. There's a kind of doing what the audience might have been doing. It's just a regular citizen in a way who is trying to lead this investigation because the police is not doing anything, which is the point of the story, to show that the police is incapable and something needs to be done about it. And I think one key element that needs to be introduced into this discussion is the original case and what happened there, because it's all brewing from there. There was this real South Korean serial killer who had been in some kind of a relationship. Then that relationship fell apart. Something happened and he just started killing people one by one, and it took very long before the police started to get the investigation properly going, and at one point they actually had the killer in their hands, and then they had to let him loose. He proceeded to kill even more people, and he managed to kill many people before he was finally captured, and is currently waiting for his death sentence, which will probably not be even executed, judging from the fact that South Korea hasn't done any executions, killing people for their crimes since 1997, but that's the official verdict of the court judge. So essentially, it's a critique of this type of happenings.
Well, it is a critique of the happenings. Yes, I wouldn't take it as far as to say that it shows the police being extremely ineffective throughout the film, because in the chaser, the cops are actually as ineffective as is the main protagonist.
Really? Well, the main protagonist at least is doing most of the investigations for them, and he is leading it as best as he can, and he is getting more involved and able once he gets perhaps emotionally attached to it.
Yes, he is getting more emotionally invested with the investigation. But at the same time, both parties, the main character and the police force of the film, they kind of do the exact same things, and they end up in the same resolutions at the same time.
Yeah,
like both the main character and the police force. If you want to criticize the way how the cops lose the suspect, and which leads into the film's killer, being freed once again, because the bureaucracy and the red tape come into the cops' way, that there is a quickly shown lawyer character who comes to the police station once they have apprehended the suspect and are performing interrogations, who informs the cops that they have to release the suspect, since the time limit for which they can actually, hold him captive without raising any any proper indictment for his arrest. And well, that the cops don't manage to charge him properly before that time limit ends, and therefore they are forced to release him. This is kind of something that also happens with our main character, who also loses the suspect. The cops and the main character, they also eventually find the suspect at the climax of the film around the same time. The difference there is just +1 fight scene for our main protagonist. And before, our main protagonist actually managed to come up into this conclusion, the cops have managed to figure out that what they are dealing with is a killer and not a human trafficker. So they, in my opinion, they are kind of, the both parties, the main character and the police force, are as effective throughout the film. They both do the similar type of, or they face the similar type of mistakes. The main one, which is, losing your suspect.
Yeah, well, when it comes to the human trafficking, or is he a killer or not, it's not even something that the police is able to conclude or deduce. It's just something that they presume and start the investigation based on that, because they're running out of time. And they would have actually had more time, but there is this, what is this, chief police or section chief or something like this, and sends the message back to the headquarters that we need to get rid of this thing, this guy right now, before this thing explodes, before we get all of these accusations that look at what the police has done, while the mayor is getting, well, literally shit-faced, where they actually are now kind of more fucked because they let him loose. So yeah, it's always kind of a balancing act. When it comes to the whole protagonist's arc, he starts off as an asshole, but he becomes a better person. He kind of becomes a kind of the part of the regular people, or kind of their voice. He's now facing off with this bad guy in the end, which is what everybody kind of, I believe, wants to see in the cinema, this little face-off, and wants to prevent the murdering of the prostitute. But is unable to do that, and upon that realization, it hits the character that, yeah, I haven't been actually on top of this thing, and it's just showing what happens when you are not emotionally involved in these cases, especially true for something like a prostitute, which is a theme, once again, that happens in all of his films, at least two of them. There is somebody who is, actually, it happens in all of the three films. There is always a character who is kind of perhaps outside the law, or perhaps the best term for this is somebody marginalized. And this is where the disinterest happens. We have a prostitute, or we have John Sock, or we have a village fool who's throwing rocks but actually has an insight into an investigation. But maybe it could be said that this is what the Chaser is doing. I can see that it's not working for everybody, and I'm not saying that it necessarily is kind of tying all the ends so well by the end. You know what I mean? I think it doesn't really. Perhaps it's kind of lacking like a better punch at the point that it's making. Maybe it's speaking more to Korean audiences via these real life events. But it wasn't satisfying enough to you, is that it?
To me, the narrative composition, you are following an investigator who is studying the wrong case, essentially. It didn't work exactly. To me, it led into a kind of a disconnect with the film, where I was constantly waiting, when does the main investigator, our main protagonist, finally catch up with the case and start to inspect and study the real case, the real crime that has happened.
But that's kind of what made this film exciting, because as the audience we know more than the characters on screen, and then you're just having this kind of agonizing feeling like, please, can you already figure it out? And you're just kind of shouting at the screen, like, and then they finally manage to get there, and then kind of the tension evaporates when the woman gets killed. Yeah, it was almost there, but you couldn't quite get there. It also has quite magnificent chase scenes, and at least one of them, if not all of them, they used different villages combined in the shots to make these running scenes more fascinating with how they look. They wanted the right hilly look, and combined with the music that is playing with this intense drumming, it's some of the greatest stuff in a while. It must be some of the best scenes in the entire film. There are some frustrating points here when the prostitute is going to this flat of the killer, and I kept wondering, why does she have to go all the way into the flat? Like, why couldn't you just get through the front porch and then try to send a message behind his back? But no, she goes all the way in and then tries to send a message, losing her chances. The scene with the wall painting, it's hard to see, first of all, what it all means and what it's depicting behind that wallpaper when we have the painting. And there is this kind of a pullback shot when our protagonist is looking at the whole painting and entire room, and there's this kind of a music that is supposed to evoke the emotions of this is some kind of a big deal, right? You need to understand what is going on here, or that this is a big deal, and then only later on we make the connection to what it is, and it seems to be Jesus Christ himself. What happened in the scene where the girl is unconscious on the ground and there's some food on the ground? Do you have a theory what the hell happened there?
I just took it that she had been punched by someone who is never shown to you, nor is the incident itself.
Kind of dangerous neighborhoods. Also enjoyed most of what happens at the police station and the banter between the protagonist and antagonist. And for example, where the what I will call the 4885, the Sapalparo guy, just giving these faces like of confusion and then kind of mumbling it out that he killed all of those people. That is talking about serious matters, but it's also made with kind of a comedic value, if you will, and showing the psychoticness of the character. Also love all the reaction shots at the pimp, for example. This is fucking insane. The police is not listening to him in any way. It's a funny confession. Or the does it taste delicious, bastard? Is this time to eat chocolate? And all those looks. Henrik was dead serious throughout the entire film.
Well, I wasn't picking any favorite lines. If that's what you are looking for.
Yeah, mine is that. This is fucking insane. Shibal. Would that be the Yellow Sea then?
Well, why not? The perhaps kind of a most traditional, I would say easy to follow film.
What? There's a lot of crossing storylines here.
You have some, but I wouldn't say any of them were really that complex or hard to follow, even though you have them. To quickly summarize the Yellow Sea, you have there down on his luck, cab driver who has a gambling problem, has a kid, wife has left. So you have that the first storyline is where is the wife, what has happened, because he's up to his neck in debt. The taxi driver, out of desperation, takes the main plotline of the film, which is assassinate a random dude X. But then you have the assassination plotline, where first of all you follow the cab driver as he's preparing and planning the attack. Then you have the attack where essentially the target's limo driver or chauffeur is the one who stabs him in, and then the cab driver becomes blamed for a murder he did not commit and is now being chased by the cops. Also the criminal element of South Korea, and then as a kind of third plot line you have the business dealings with the South Korean criminal element and the main kind of a gangster, the main human trafficker. So essentially you have three plot lines, from which the first one, missing wife, is the personal character motive, emotionally driven storyline. It's also the one that we least spend time with. And then you have what actually happened with the hit or the contract killing. Why did the chauffeur kill his boss, and that kind of crosses with the whole Yanjin South Korean gangsters making a deal or coming to terms plotline.
Yeah, so the gangsters are North Koreans who moved to China. And what is clear is that there is this character who is sent from Yanbian, a poor guy who is in debt, and his wife has moved to South Korea with the guy's money that he has borrowed, and now he's waiting for the money to be sent back to him from his girlfriend or wife, who is now in South Korea, and then nothing is ever heard from her. That's one part of the mystery in the film, and then there is this chauffeur who suddenly kills his boss, but everything beyond that gets a little bit fucked up, and we will get to that. So, first of all, like for most of the film, I was seeing that this business guy is also related to the death of this guy who the chauffeur went to kill, but apparently they are actually, or had been actually, good friends. And then this business guy is dealing with this guy who sent the guy to kill his boss friend. They have some business together, although nobody knows what kind of fucking business it is. But now the business guy is making the proposition for him that they could split the money related to something, and the business guy was never even related to the killing, so it's entirely something else. Who the fuck knows what?
No. It's business guy. It's business guy and the target's wife. There are two hits put on to the same dude by basically two different persons. Business guy wants his business partner, the target, dead, because target has been stuffing dick into business guy's wife. So there's a whole cheating thing. And then the target's wife also wants his husband dead because of, the whole cheating thing.
What the fuck? Where was it established that the business guy has anything related to any dick problems?
He's outright states it during his final death moments. It's the last thing that he said.
Well, okay. Well, that was super random. What woman? The lady who was in one scene or was it a prostitute? I don't know. Was it a wife? I don't know.
No. Business guy's wife is not being shown in the film, but he has one.
And has sex with some other lady. Okay, got it.
No. So. There are two businessmen in the film, target and business guy. And target and business guy both have wives. And target has been sleeping with business guy's wife.
Well, what he was saying when he was doing his dying breaths, I took that just as some kind of a random mumbling that didn't make any goddamn sense. But apparently it has some plot device on it going on. Got it?
It's a confession where he gives out the motive. Why have your friend killed?
Yeah, but what friend?
The target who gets stabbed. Like the dude everybody wants to kill in the first third of the film.
Right, but it doesn't make any sense, because then there is... Let's go further in the film. There is the confession. The one's group, it finds out that some guy said he paid people to kill Kim Song-hyun, the target. Someone who came by to a store often said he wanted to kill Kim Jong-un. And so it's this Yangbyan bastard who wants to kill the target, doesn't succeed. Somebody else kills this guy who is working, whose boss is somebody who is related to this chauffeur. Somebody ordered this, and then the prisoner continues that, quote, "My wife told me that a friend's lover in Yonggil did that line of work," end quote. And the person who has taken the job is the bastard in Yangbin, who comes back to South Korea. And
it's nothing more than just a long lineup of people trying to outsource the killing to someone below him.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's say that this business bastard, who, how to fucking call these bastards, Taewon finds this confession that somebody ordered to kill the guy that he already wanted to kill himself, succeeded, and then he's pissed off that this other guy also had the assignment to kill the bastard, but wasn't able to do it. Why this young Byan taxi driver? What is wrong with you? You got what you wanted. It's done. What's your problem?
Well, it's the traditional tie up the loose ends thing. You always, in these type of films, you always double cross the person who somebody has hired to do the actual killing.
Okay, but this other guy is supposed to be his friend.
Yep.
But then they meet, and the businessman is pissed off because a couple of his associates have been killed in that hotel room. They meet, they want to split money for something, and then he's super pissed when he hears that somebody else has been trying to kill this guy, and oh, it's that bastard who used to be my friend. And then there's also some fucking going on in the background, and there's a lot of fucking going on in this film. There's this one woman who, as you said, supposedly is not the wife. Then there is this kind of our main protagonist who comes to kill the guy and doesn't succeed and wants also some fucking to do, but is unable to locate the wifey. And the wifey has been fucking with some other guy and then gets killed because she wanted to return to young Bien, supposedly. Whew.
Your summary of the film somehow made it more confusing for me than the film itself.
This is directly from the film, so I'm not making this up.
You are absolutely making this up. The taxi driver's wife is living. She's alive. Comes back home at the very end of the film.
No.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
not even that.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's just something that seems to be inside our lead character's head. That's what he's visioning. Just like there is a visioning in The Chaser.
No. The whole basically plotline about what was it? The fish salesman who kills the lady he has been having affair
Which
with.
doesn't make any sense to begin with, but yeah.
Yeah. It's a different incident. It's not the taxi driver's wife.
Well, but it's heavily
He
suggested
mistakes the
that it
fucking
is.
identities. Goes looking for his wife, ended up in the wrong apartment.
Yeah, and it's looked up by some guy that we don't know anything about. This is a random guy checking on the wifey on that.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
Taxi driver's wife is at the end of the film. She's alive and well and comes back home.
Maybe, at least in a vision, or wherever she is. She takes a train, leaves the train somewhere.
Back at the goddamn train station where they all leave to South Korea.
Leave to South Korea.
Yep.
You know, the road is from Yangbian, you take the train to the Chinese coast and then you cross the Yellow Sea and come to South Korea by switching boats and shit.
Yeah, and the wife kind of does the same trip that she first did from Yanbian to South Korea. She now reverses it. Comes from South Korea back to Yanbian.
Yeah, maybe. Of course, that would fit nicely with what seems to be usually the MO of the director, that you have the downer ending and actually the wife was all along, all fine, loved very much this guy and wanted to go back with the money. Why she is going there with the money and didn't call on anything, that's interesting. And when you take into account everything that was said about the wifey being a little bit mischievous in South Korea.
Yeah, but the whole mischievous thing comes from some more conservative older lady who apparently has never liked the wife. It's just bad mouthing.
And then killing some random woman. Yeah.
Yeah. The lady, the one who ends up killed is some random woman.
Yeah. Okay. Well, could be. But you know, this film has some quite fantastic chase scenes, and they're pretty intense. Something where it's just about milliseconds before you might be potentially dying, but of course it's kind of implausible in many ways how the escapes happen, and you know, I made a kind of a list here of the damage taken by our protagonist. First gets shot in the shoulder, then stabbed in the leg, 4 cuts in the hands or the body, axe to the back, and gets stabbed in the car trunk, and still going.
Yeah, it does that typical action movie thing where the main character gets hit and shot like 5 million times, and there's really no permanent damage to a dude.
Yeah.
I was thinking a hell of a lot of Taken and other Liam Neeson action films as I was watching The Yellow Sea.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. This is it's kind of a more pleasant than having firearms all the time. And besides, you know, you're in South Korea, you're not gonna get anywhere near firearms anyway. So better just pick up that axe when you're in that gang while you're at it. And it gets the fight scenes a little bit more physical or more personal when that happens. And kind of digging that when fingers fly off. There was some praise also for the car chase scenes where you have a lot of shaky cams. Well, you have like handheld cam for a lot of the movie, if not kind of all of it. But it's clearly done as a kind of a shaky cam in that car chase, which can be a little bit irritating if you start paying attention to it, as always. But yeah, not a big deal. I quite enjoyed that. What is in the box? The white box that gets dumped into the Yellow Sea.
It's the ashes from the unrelated lady that gets killed by the the fish salesman guy.
Okay, they had time to get that too. What the fuck?
Yeah. The taxi driver, like there's that moment when the taxi driver guy, because of the mistaken identity thinks that the lady who has been killed by the fish salesman guy would be his wife. So there is that moment when he pays or orders the random dude that he has sent to identify the lady's corpse at the police station. And the dude goes there and is like, it's such of a mess. I can't really say if it's the same lady as in the photograph, but still, tells the cab driver that yeah, it's your wife, it's the same lady. I saw it clear as day, and it's in that moment that the cab driver tells the dude that have her cremated as soon as possible. And later on, there's the exchange when he gives the dude 200 to 500 for his services and the ashes that are in the box.
Yeah, okay. But the wife scenes by the train station, isn't all of that shown when the protagonist is already on the boat and has kind of lost consciousness or is dreaming? And then after the credits roll or between the credits, you have this kind of added scene where she departs the train. And so it could be kind of left open-ended there. That is it really happening or is it not happening?
I didn't get that from those scenes. To me, it was really clear that wife comes back home.
I kind of enjoyed those first-person shots which get a little bit blurry. For example, was it in one of those vans with several people who are getting smuggled into the country? He falls asleep there. It gets blurry. Then he wakes up, gets back from the blurry with the sound, and something that was in the chaser where the woman was about to get bludgeoned to death. Finally, she sees or thinks these images of her daughter, and in a way the same happens here by the end. The guy is seeing visions of the lady friend at the train station. That's how I kind of read that. I'm not sure if there was also the daughter in those visions, because I think you should have been thinking of that daughter as well, but I guess here it was only the girl or the woman. What's your experience with the Yellow Sea?
never seen it before.
Same here.
I have been aware of its existence for some years, but I've never actually checked it out myself. I'm not entirely certain if there is a finished DVD release of the Yellow Sea.
Right.
As previously mentioned, my experience when it comes to the talks surrounding the director and getting DVDs out of his films is precisely that I didn't find any discussion centering around the director before Wailing. And when it comes to getting DVDs, the only DVD that I have been able to find in Finland as a Finnish release would be The Chaser. And then the Yellow Sea and the Wailing, those would be your amazing orders.
Would that be the Wailing?
Well, why not?
Quote, "I'll shoot this and go to hell," end quote, said by cinematographer Hong Kyung-po regarding this film. This is because it seemed that the cinematographer got a little bit obsessed about getting every image to his liking. He went to the woods, and according to the director, he was a little bit even possessed almost, like going to forbidden places in the woods, looking for those perfect shots, at which point the director himself started to scratch some of his storyboards because he realized that this guy is doing better work than I am. So then there was this one shot that they wanted of the village, I believe some kind of a overall establishing shot, and in the way was a tree. This pesky tree ruining my shot. And then the cinematographer was contemplating that, dude, we have to cut this tree so we get our shot. But apparently this particular tree was of the holy sort, or the kind of sort that the villagers thought that is protecting the place, something that shouldn't be cut. And the director remarked, if you're gonna cut this tree, then you might go to hell. And the cinematographer thought about this answer for a second and then said, well, I'll shoot this and go to hell. So he cut the tree. After which, both the director and cinematographer went to have a little shaman session of their own to not leave any ill effects on the gods or whatnot. So that's the level of dedication going on here. What's your experience with the Wailing?
Originally saw it when it came out, somewhere around 2016, 2017, when the West found the film, and the whole original discourse around the film started in the West.
Okay, I saw this about a month ago because I saw that everybody of my friends who had been watching the film said that it was absolutely fantastic and 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars, fantastic. So I just had to see what all the fuss is about. Police corruption, once again in this film. The police is late to places, police sloppy with the evidence, touching it, police is scared, police is generally incompetent when the possible culprit is right under their noses, but they seem to ignore it pretty terrifically.
Yeah, I don't know about corruption. To me, it was, as you put it, incompetence more than anything true sinister or something done with a malicious intent like, corruption.
Not corruption or incompetence in the level of anything in The Chaser. Some rules are being broken there. This is something that happens also in the Yellow Sea. The police is incredibly incompetent in catching the young guy who is fooling them left and center and right.
Then again, I would say that in the Yellow Sea, the cops are perhaps the most competent, and in the Wailing, they are the least competent.
Well,
The Chaser kind of being in the middle ground. Pretty incompetent, but at the same time being as incompetent as our main character.
Then again, the protagonist falls on the police's lap on all of those police cars and then still manages to escape in the Yellow Sea. But I see what you're getting at here. This is the most religious and less grounded film of his. We can definitely say that.
It is. Story-wise, the Wailing centers around South Korean Buddhism or shamanism, and on thematical side, its pivot point is very much in Christianity.
Yeah, so essentially, if you haven't seen the film, it's gonna discussing Christianity. It's talking this ancient beliefs. You're not given a clear indication of what the end result of the film is, who is to blame. But I certainly have my own way of seeing things here, and I believe you are vehemently gonna oppose that. We'll see. First of all, there is this guy who lives on top of a hill, a Japanese guy. Japanese. The Japanese guy did it. The Japanese is evil. This stranger. We must get him and get the lynch mob. Police forces are not able to do anything, so we get the rights into our own hands. Let's get this Japanese guy. Get it? So, all of this punching back Japanese guy theme indicates to me extremely heavily that the director is not wanting to keep him as the bad guy. On the contrary, it's the same fucking thing once again, all the way chasing back from the chaser. As I stated, the marginalized of the society are the prostitutes. In the Yellow Sea, it's the Yangbyan dude coming from the Third Korea, and in here, it's the Japanese guy. So it's giving kind of the false leads also for the audience. There is a series of deaths that happen after the Japanese guy arrived, and all this, like, do you really want to go down this path if this is gonna be your antagonist? And I believe it's not our antagonist of the night. This film speaks to me as being kind of a zombie flick when you start watching it, but then it's something entirely different. You could argue that we're dealing with zombies as well, but some kind of a living dead creatures, yes. So it's nice, you can't kind of pinpoint what is gonna happen with this film. When I started seeing these zombie-like creatures, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm ready to turn this off any minute now. But fortunately, we have something else going for it. I have seen my zombie films for this year. What's the teaching of the film, Henrik? If you're a shitty cop, the devil will curse you. Is that it?
It's more on the Christian side. It's about putting your faith or having faith on someone, even though essentially the reality surrounding you would be hinting you on the other direction.
There's some Christian symbolism here, definitely. So the rooster is singing there 3 times, getting back to the New Testament.
Pretty much, also having that scene thematically exactly at the same point that as it happens in the New Testament, and well, to really tie it down with Christianity, there is the whole opening line that opens the film, which is from the Bible, the moment when Jesus Christ, after his resurrection, appears to his apostles and makes the case that am I not real to you at this moment?
In Asia, there's an ancient belief that you need to use poison against poison. So hence you have the Japanese shaman who's using the photos, etc. Same tactics that the demon does. So he fights the demon with the same deeds. I deduce that the photos, they are either burned by the shaman or taken by the ponytail shaman, whichever way. Anyway, at the end of the film, we see a bunch of photos, which could be the same ones.
Yeah, they are the same ones. The Japanese guy is literally the devil, and you should get him out of the South Korean village as soon as possible.
No. So
yes. You can see it in the closing of Cave Sarge.
no, actually. So the film is giving you a lot of hints throughout the way that the Japanese guy has nothing to do with it. It's giving also some indications for it that the Japanese guy would be behind it. But the more we get to this, more we progress with the film, we see, for example, the shot where the shaman is doing the shaman thing, and after the fact, when it's interrupted, the Japanese guy gets up and notices that this guy is no longer in the car. So this guy has reanimated and is now causing some havoc towards the policeman and the whole lynch mob that is gonna come to the house. And the Japanese guy is totally horrified about the fact. That is because he wanted to keep this guy not reanimated. He wanted to keep the guy killed as he was. And now that he is reanimated, he is shocked and he escapes the lynch mob and then sees the woman again in the distance who is behind all of this.
No, the lady is the guardian spirit.
No.
who tries to oppose the Japanese demon and the ponytail shaman who are in cahoots together.
Well, the woman has cursed both of these characters. As you see, this noble character, this woman, throws the Japanese guy on the windshield of the car so that he essentially dies. But then the woman reanimates this Japanese guy, and now he definitely is in cahoots with the woman because he has been cursed and reanimated for her deeds.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the end, this guy is possessed, the Japanese guy, by the devil, and in the cave he speaks via the devil. That's how I took it. And notice how all the victims have red or yellow eyes, so it's just like the so-called devil in the cave. You can...
Who is the Japanese guy?
No.
That's just like the Japanese guy has the whole devilish red eyes in the beginning of the film when he's first seen.
Of course, he's possessed.
Or it's been depicted by the people, the eyewitnesses who have seen him butt naked eating raw deer and stuff like that in the woods.
Well, when it comes to this woman that I'm gonna call a crazy woman, the woman still smashes the Japanese guy on the windshield and then asks the bleeding shaman to leave and likely then throws shit at his windshield right after. Or the Japanese guy not permitting his accomplice to leave, if you will. Or the good Japanese shaman is throwing in the last efforts to get rid of the evil Korean shaman and his woman accomplice before the Japanese himself gets to be consumed by these two, whichever way. But this can make only sense if the Korean shaman is possessed also by the lady because he's also trying to help the Japanese shaman. Then
yeah,
again,
that's precisely why the case, most logical case here is that the Japanese guy is cahoots with the ponytail Korean shaman, and they are the two bad guys of the film.
Maybe. But then again, there is the cock crowing those 3 times. Symbolism from the Bible, and is this denying her 3 times? Is she a Christian ghost or just messing with the father, wasting his time? Notice how also he is always late to every occasion, and will be now too, thanks to this woman. And in my view, she is still the personification of evil who corrupts all the characters in the film.
When it comes to the cock or the rooster, shouting 3 times, it, as you point out, it alludes to the New Testament, but the core of that moment in the Bible is precisely the fact that it's in precisely the moment when Peter fails to believe in Jesus and what Jesus is saying to him. Like there is essentially the whole statement goes that Jesus tells to Peter that before the rooster crows you will deny me 3 times, and Peter is does not believe this, is headstrong in the fact that he is devoted to Jesus and would never deny him. And later on in New Testament, there comes the moment when Peter denounces Jesus 3 times, and then the rooster crows, and Peter realizes that what Jesus was telling him before, it actually was the truth. that ended up happening. And that's the same thing that happens with the Wailing's ending and with the rooster there. The lady is telling our main hero that if you return back to home, as would be his first instinct in that moment, you will destroy my protective spells or the trap that I have laid out for the evil spirits wanting to harm your family, and that will lead into catastrophe for your family. Your daughter will commit acts of violence. And our main hero refuses to believe that, runs back home before the rooster has crowed 3 times. And, well, as we see, it leads into the trap withering as he passes his doorstep, and what he ends up finding is the slaughterhouse.
Yeah, or it's the trap that activates once he goes there, the trap that is meant for the father who gets into the trap of the woman. Like you have in the beginning of the film, one of those crumpled down school-like, may I add like school-like looking leaves of this thing. Similarly crumpled down.
Yeah, which once again would tie into a protective trap laid out against the evil spirits.
Yeah, it could have been. I guess you can theorize that it would have been meant for the shaman, but then again, if he would arrive there and everything would happen in the same order, then everybody would have been fucking dead already. Anyway, yeah, there is the father sins fucking in a car, so yeah, the character is very sinful, and there is the rock throwing reference to Bible in the John 8 and 7. He, or I guess in this case she that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone, as she casts or throws the cups with the stones. But can you imagine how hurtful that must be when you have a South Korean film and a Christian woman who is kind of doing the Lord's deed, and then you have the village fool or the village devil who is Japanese, and looking at the way how the general population in this country see each other, only 17% of South Koreans like the Japanese or think of them as favorably. And this number for the Japanese towards South Koreans is 15%. And then making Japanese your main antagonist? Really?
Well, you have just been headstrong about Japanese characters in any Korean film ever since we landed on North Korean Hwanghae, and it's a depiction of the Japanese ninjas who were the bad guys. Women stealing bad guys of the last third of the film. This is nothing more but except the Hwanghae traumas creeping back in.
No, but really, these are actual statistics that have been measured. Yeah, but I really wouldn't go that route if I were Na Hong-jin, but what do I know? Some further points about the Korean shaman. Wears the same so-called diapers as the Japanese man. So they're both shamans and evil shamans. Is that it? Then there is the ritual and the girl suffering at the same time as the shaman hits the wooden statue. Actually, the wooden statue is Chun Wu. Could be kind of a good indicator that he is malevolent either via the hand of the woman's actions or is just malevolent and working for the Japanese, if you will. A Chun Wu it's a village guardian for the Koreans, a Korean totem pole made of wood. So it's been traditionally placed on the edges of villages to mark boundaries and fight demons. At the end, the Korean shaman also takes these photos. Notice how, by the way, the Korean shaman, he's on his way to go supposedly help this cub and the family, but on the way he is stopped by the woman. Then he starts nosebleeding like hell at that point and starts puking some awful shit. And then she tells him to go have your thingies done somewhere else. So he leaves, turns around, takes the order, takes the command, in my view, that was that now he's under a spell, or is definitely terrified, and is going to do all of this that we see later on, taking the pictures and all the wrong steps. This is a change in his character right here.
Not that big of a change. He's just terrified because of the guardian spirit. Like up until that point, the Korean shaman has been free to do whatever he likes without anybody really physically opposing him at any point. And now at this point, for the first time in the film, the Korean shaman is in any type of danger because now he starts to bleed, which is enough to scare him off and make him, or at least tempt him to leave the village.
Yeah, fair reading. If you want to go through that route. I also am aware about the quote, "The rat fell into the trap." So he's in on it, but who's running the show? You might want to decide that yourself.
It's the literal Japanese demon in the cave.
Jesus Christ, if so. Then there are the crows. The crows, are they used for bad or good? Most likely bad, is my reading. And the shaman goes to collect this crow from one of those containers at the family yard.
Yeah, in the pot of soy where there's one crow. It's a protective element put there by the guardian spirit. And as the shaman breaks the vase, he also breaks the talisman or basically breaks the protective spell surrounding the house.
Or that he was a good guy and tried to get rid of this crow shit. There's also a deleted ending.
There is, and I have stayed quiet about it because I am not the biggest fan of trying to find the seal the deal by looking at the scene that the director has left out of the film. But yes, since you throw it out, yes, there exists a deleted ending, which makes it even more clearer that yes, it was the Japanese guy and the ponytail shaman all along, as they ride happily together to the, well, not the beautiful sunset, but a possible sequel or later adventures together to kill yet another village.
Or the misunderstood foreigner just simply wanted to give candy to this little girl and now has to leave the village because of all this scorn placed misdeedly on him.
There's also that offhanded remark which would also suggest that the Japanese guy would have raped that one woman who ends up hanging herself from the tree early on in the film.
Yeah.
So you have the whole sweet candy and sexual assault.
Yeah, well, once again, headstrongly, I took that as a story simply circulated around the town, which never took place.
Yeah, that's one of the stories surrounding the Japanese guy which is not confirmed.
Yeah. But this is how the director intended the whole thing. He wanted it to be as ambiguous or as multi-layered or multi-decipherable as possible, so that there would be at least 3 different types of interpretations from different people in the audience. So the people who think that they kind of absorb everything and understand it in some way that seems to be kind of the absolute truth. And those people who kind of miss parts of it. And then the third group was, I believe, the people who just make up shit as they go along, which is kind of what you might have to do if you want to, reach some conclusion about the story. An interviewer asked the director, quote, "This interview is mainly going to be read by American readers, some of whom may not be so familiar with your work. Is there any kind of message you'd like to give them as a way to prepare for the unique ride they'll get in The Wailing?" And the director responds, "I have no idea what kind of person you are to watch my film. Nevertheless, I tried to make a film for you. Whatever ideas come to you while you watch the film, they're yours. I want this film to be your own. On the other hand, there is one thing I wish everyone who watches this film to feel, regardless of who they are. A condolence for those who disappeared after having fallen as victims of the world, and for those who are left behind. I sincerely wish this film gives you some time for condolences. End quote. Here the director is kind of referring back to what he told, what happened to in his life after making the Yellow Sea. He was constantly in funerals of his friends. And in South Korea, apparently, the funerals run for 3 days traditionally. So you have a lot of time to contemplate and think about your friends. And while doing that, he started to get the kind of the ideas for the Wailing, which deals with death, or the concept of why. Why was it these people that had to die or suffer? This film probably doesn't really answer that, but that was kind of the driving force.
Well, it does kind of answer it. It's a different question if the answer is satisfying to anyone. That the film states that what happens in the film happened because, well, essentially because just a pure shit luck. Like the village ends up tied with this demon who, as the film points out, essentially is just, throwing his fishing line, like spiritually speaking, and seeing what bites, and those who bite are the ones who become possessed.
Yeah, good one. This director seriously has some problem with the police force. Even it ends with the dialogue. It's okay, that is a policeman. End credits.
Well, usually they end up doing that. Anyways, but to me, that's one of the running themes when it comes to South Korean cinema. It is the nature that they quite often are extremely critical of the surrounding society and its institutions. And one of the institutions that usually get put into a critical light would be the police institution.
Okay, I tried to think of similar examples, but do you have anything as an example?
Well, hard to say from the top of my head. Infernal Affairs would be the first one that comes to mind. Basically, the criminal element is extremely capable of infiltrating the cops, God knows how many times.
Oh yeah. Well, Memories of Murder, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. Basically, all the films stemming from the director of Memories of Murder, the cops are largely incompetent in Mother as well.
Yeah.
And it's surprisingly tricky to actually start to name South Korean, like certifiably South Korean films on all off the top of your head.
There is kind of that corrupt behavior by the police also in the beginning, where he decides not to enter the crime scene because he'd rather stay eating some lunch or breakfast or dinner with the family before going, if you want to read it that way.
Yeah, to me, it once again, it's incompetence and the laziness.
Yeah. Quickies? Special mention for an actor goes to.
From my end, it goes to the Wailing and its main character's actor Kwak Do-won, who, well, altogether for me, Wailing was perhaps the hardest one to get into because of the conflicting styles that also ties very much to Kwak Do-won's acting, which varies from, well, extremely outlandish and comedical, which is what he is in the beginning of the film, to the much more serious and somber performance that prevails at the second half of the Wailing. So there is that kind of two different styles that go off, and which did cause me some disconnect because I wasn't too keen on the Wailing's more comedic parts and moments, and I kinda hated Kwak Do-won's character at the first half of the film when the comedic element was more present. But still, I must give it to him. He does give two very different type of performances in course of one film. So yeah, Kwak gets my nomination.
Okay, if I were to pick also only one out of these three films, so we don't spend the entire evening here in the lab, I would say that goes to Kim Yeon-suk from The Chaser, as he gives a really top performance here. Also, Ha Jung-woo, they have a great chemistry duo going on there, if you can call it that, with the killer there. But I think the performance is very natural. It just comes very easily for him. It is something great to see in a kind of a breakout film. Or he's very humorous. Just kind of steals most of the show. It's also kind of the character that you see in the Yellow Sea. It's kind of maybe more of his personality that he's giving out. It's a kind of immediate response to things being funny, quick and efficient. What resonated with you most with these films?
That's kind of hard to say because thematically they differentiate from each other quite a lot. But for me, perhaps the biggest kind of a combining element would be the kind of a look on the isolated and insular kind of a societal circles, as we mentioned, but it's extremely badly worked out. But what I mean is the fact that all of these films, they take a look on some form of a smaller isolated social structure. Like in The Chaser, you have the prostitution, and in the Yellow Sea you have the immigration, and in the Wailing you have the isolated insular town or village. So to me, that's kind of what resonated the most.
Okay, perhaps for me it's the way that these films are paced. One could say that maybe the length of the Yellow Sea is not really justified. We didn't really talk about the lengths of the films, but the Yellow Sea runs for about 2 hours and 30 minutes, if I remember correctly. It doesn't really feel such of a long film. There's a bunch of great scenes. Maybe the most memorable is when he's trying to plan his kill in this building, but then it gets completely twisted and he's not able to do that. It's almost like Hitchcockian build-up going there, but then it goes into some weird direction all of a sudden. But to get back into the point, I think the most justified running time, the most cohesive, the most successful overall build for these films was in The Chaser, which runs for 2 hours. And the Wailing, of course, goes forever. And I had to look at my watch when looking at the Wailing. It didn't really captivate me. And maybe all those themes are not really something that I personally am looking for so much. But like overall, it was interesting how he kind of shows to the audience that we are going this way, but then we are actually going the other way. For example, it wasn't so much about the prostitute as a character as it was about the societal issues and the clash of these two egos even, really. In The Chaser, in the Yellow Sea, the whole taking into the Yanbian into the story, that resonated quite a lot with me, because that makes for such of an interesting setup where you have China, North Korea, South Korea, Yanbian, all of this together. You could make a lot of great action films out of this, I'm sure, or any kind of thriller material is guaranteed with those. And the way that he kind of keeps the show going in the Yellow Sea as well, even though For me, it was definitely the hardest of this to follow. But it's always engaging, and maybe the most important thing in the Yellow Sea is that the action really fucking works. Also in the Chaser, it really works. It has like a meaning, a motive, and it's not just like what you see many times in some really tired action films, where it's just action for the sake of the action. Instead, it's very tied into the script, I would say. In one adjective or more, how would you describe these films?
This is quite bad adjective, but quiet. And I don't mean that in the sense that these would be quiet movies. No, there's quite a lot of sound. But in all of his films, even in the most action-packed, The Yellow Sea, I found quite a lot of these moments where I felt the movie was emotionally quiet. Like it took its time where it kinda stopped for a beat every now and then, and where the films themselves were not trying to forcefully build an emotional tension. Like you get those moments. But the Wailing, in my opinion, is the most clearest one of these. You get a lot of landscape shots. You get a lot of shots where people are moving slowly or not at all, and where the audio of the film is it's toned down. Like you can see that there could be an attempt to build a stronger emotional effect connection to the movie, but the movie chooses not to do that. And what I mean is that type of quiet, that type of kind of taking your time and not trying to use every single second of your movie to build up some type of a sense that this here now is super important. Kind of taking a moment to breathe.
Yeah, one that sticks out to me is the apart from the Wailing is the kind of the certain groundedness, the realisticity, the kind of reduced colors, or in the case of the Chaser, the reduced lighting really gives it kind of a certain realistic umph, which some people have commented though about that. Why have you made this movie so underlit? To which I would say, well, why not? So realistic and brutal movies. A lot of violence in all of them, surely. But not only that. So tune in for the story. There's a lot of it. Would you consider to watch these ever again?
I would, and most likely will at some point. Not like anytime soon, but I'm fairly confident that I will revisit the movies at some time. The Wailing perhaps being the one that will take the longest time before I recheck it.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I do see myself visiting the movies again.
Yeah, funnily enough, the Chaser, I remember it being way more brutal and way more dark than I remember it. Somehow I remembered it being some kind of even like a Saw film where you had a hell of a lot of cutting of body parts visible on the scene and blood spilling everywhere. There's blood spilling, but not that much. It's more in your head, and when the bad guy locks the girl inside inside this flat and sees the kind of the padlock on the door. You know, that was built so well. That was truly so exhaustingly painful. Just on an emotional level, even before any body parts were cut. And I actually see mostly The Chaser as the most watchable film out of this, in a way of, once again, how it's built, and once again, even though it is a violent film, it is the easiest for me to watch. It's my favorite out of these, I can say that already. But The Yellow Sea, yeah, surely I will return to it The Wailing runs for too long, so I'm not going to look for it very soon. Do you think the films have any staying power or legacy?
Most likely, yeah. Like in the Wailing's case, kinda has become such of a big thing that I would say that will last. When it comes to the Chaser and the Yellow Sea, those are kinda harder films to estimate how much lasting power there is. Uh, I don't know if they are kind of if they have been found enough, but it kind of comes down to depending on exactly how much oomph the Wailing can eventually muster up for Chaser and the Yellow Sea. I can see that they may yet build the lasting power in Western territories. They may become like, especially the Chaser may become some type of a cinema club favorite at some point. But in my opinion, it relies a lot on what type of a legacy, how strong legacy the Wailing will leave on its wake.
Yeah, nevertheless, I guess we can agree that Na Hong-jin is the kind of director that our eyes will be peeled on and will be very much looking forward to any of his future endeavors. And there is one such endeavor still about to come, but I believe slowed down considerably by our friendly neighborhood Corona. But staying power and legacy, well, I did stumble upon one review that basically stated something like about Chaser. Like, I've seen this so many times before. Like, I don't really get anything out of these type of films anymore. And I think that is a huge misservice towards the film. If you're gonna see this as some kind of a Saw type of a film that is just blood, guts, and gore for the sake of it, which it's not. So
Yeah, but having seen it before doesn't necessarily mean that it's been.
yeah, maybe that's how I read the writer. So sorry in advance if that's not what you were looking for, or you were going for.
Okay, hard to say since I haven't seen the review that
Yeah,
you are describing.
Anyway, the overarching point: watch this for the plot, and not for the gore.
Yeah, most definitely that. These are not that gory movies, so if that's why you are coming to check them out, you will be disappointed most definitely.
Yeah, keep in mind that Henrik has been watching a lot of blood, guts, and gore. So, on the scale of Henrik,
2, maybe 3.
would you recommend Na Hong-jin?
I would. From his films, that the Yellow Sea perhaps is the most like tonally casual, easiest to get into, seeing how it is, well, action thriller essentially, and everybody is quite familiar with action thrillers, so it's because of that. I would say it's the easiest one to approach from these three films. The Wailing, well, everybody has been talking about The Wailing. It is pretty effective little thriller film. My biggest issue with The Wailing would be that I wasn't too keen on the kind of tonal difference within the film. I wasn't like too interested on the more comedical aspects of The Wailing. But
Wait, what is comedical about the Wailing, especially?
you mean despite the whole main character bumbling and stumbling around the crime scenes, yelling and being scared, all
Yeah,
the goddamn time hiding behind his desk.
yeah, okay. Well, I find the comedy, as I said, much stronger in Chaser. So anyway, I wasn't bothered. Well, carry on.
But yeah, that's kind of my personal issue. I've understood that a lot of people kind of really like the tonal shift in the Wailing. And the Chaser, once again, I myself, I did have a slight problem with the tone of the film. That as already mentioned, the whole it's a detective film where the detective does not know the case he's studying, even though the audiences are extremely well aware that this is a serial killer case. And where because of this there also is kind of this stumbling effect into even solving the whole case basically by anyone. But once again, yes, that's kind of my personal problem, and it's not really that strong issue with me that I wouldn't recommend the film. I do think that it's fairly effective little thriller movie. So yeah, I would from my end recommendations all around.
How would you rank them personally?
From my end, kind of hard to say because once again, different types of beasts.
Yeah.
My number one, perhaps the Yellow Sea, followed by the Wailing, and the Chaser would be the third on the third place.
Yeah, this is more about my personal favorites, if you will. I'm not going to analyze to death anymore about the how these are structured and whatnot. But what I would most likely pick from the shelves from his filmography would be first the Chaser DVD, followed by the Yellow Sea, and finishing with the Wailing. Complete the sentence, por favor. You really know you're watching Na Hong-jin films when?
When it turns out that the Japanese guy really did do it.
Nope. Or you really know you're watching Na Hong-jin when you feel it in your gut. There's no mercy. But I would ask the audience to think twice before they claim that these aren't sophisticated social commentary, because they certainly are at times. And also intelligent thrillers that do keep you at the edge of your seat and never let go. Maybe the Wailing could be a little tighter.
I must confess, I didn't have your problem with the Wailing's running time.
Okay. It looks like that Mr. Na Hong-jin is teaming up with Thai filmmaker Banjong Pisantanakun to create his next movie, Rang Chong, which is a working title. Rang Chong means psychic in Thai. It would look like that it's coming out this year, but stay tuned on that. We here at the Flick Lab will be following this every once in a while. Well, I believe that was Na Hong-jin. Any thoughts before we head out of the lab?
Not from my end, no.
So after 2 weeks, in the next episode, we will once again go to Poland to finish our Janko Maasa films, as we have already discussed Corpus Christi in one singular episode. Next time we would like to discuss Suicide Room, Warsaw 44, and The Hater from the same director.
Sounds like fun times.
It's gonna be suicide and depression and being an outcast of society. So definitely that.
Me and suicide remarks being something that has been a staple on the latest episodes.
Oh boy, what have I done?
So,
yeah.
So keep those scissors ready, Karri. I've heard some rumors about the editing jobs that that you have had to do behind the scenes.
Janko Maasa in a fortnight. See you then.
Until then. Kyllä siihen taatusti se rakennuspalikat löytyy. Mutta se on 57 leffaa, missä se on näytellyt. niin se täytyy jotenkin siis meidän saada rajattua. Mä en katso 57 Steven Seagal-elokuvaa.
Joo, how come?
Jumalauta, jossain menee itsensä kiduttamiseen raja.
Mä vedin vähän teikäläistä, että mulla on noteseja ihan missä sattuu.
Vai johon siihen sekaan sotkuu. Ja katkaisen nauhurit.